Good afternoon and a warm welcome. A Papa session. Uh, I am not gonna repeat, the introduction of each of these panelists, uh, but I would like to actually add a personal point about each of them. So, starting with Sudeep, right? Uh, I remember my interactions with him since the last over more than a decade, right? Most of it was when he was working for a large telecom player. Telecom is normally a very, very complex mandate for communicators, highly regulated, lots of controversies. Um, Especially a hairy one that he faced for many years was about a taxation issue that was going on with the government. But of course, we've seen him for last about a year now. Yeah, couple of years with Tata Motors, and it's uncanny the timing of him joining and the complete reversal in fortune of Tata Motors. They got their mojo back. So I'd like to credit a large part of that to you, and you should graciously take it, Sudeep.
Wow, that's way too much burden to carry on my shoulders, but I will take it on behalf of the entire team at Tata Motors. It's been a tremendous journey. Thank you so much for acknowledging that, Nitin. Really appreciate it.
Another interesting anecdote that I would remember about Bharatendu, who's again a very, very old friend. And I think he's had such a long stint at Hero MotoCorp that most of the industry associates and recognizes with him, right? When I see his social media feed, though he looks too old to ace social media, but I think he posts regularly. A lot of it is about some international auto conference or exhibition that he's attending. And also having pride of praise, on his pinboard at his desk is the badges that he collects from each of these conferences that he attends. Find that very, very interesting. Sarvesh ji, whom I've known for some time now, but I think all of you know he's one of the most visible faces amongst all the panelists sitting here. And the kind of work that he's done at the confluence of the social sector, government bodies, and communication is commendable, and he of course talks about it very often on various TV panels. Last but not the least, Abbas bhai. He's someone who I'll be most interested in talking to and addressing today's panel, because a lot of us sitting here either work for or service the private sector. And it'll be very interesting to understand how mega corps on the public sector side are actually adopting analysis and data at the center stage of their conversation. So with that quick brief familiarization with these people beyond their designation and titles, let me get on to the topic of the discussion today. Now, data and analysis is not something new to the profession. It's something that we've been grappling with for at least the last decade and a half as communicators. But increasingly each year, after the advent of both social media and digital media, the expectation and pressure on us as communicator to be left brain, to use data right from the time of gathering insights, and then eventually onto the process of communication, and then finally measurement. There's huge pressure. And this refuge that we used to take till about a few years back, saying, oh, but communication is half an art and half a science. You can't box in storytelling, etc. on in these matrices, etc. That refuse no longer exists, because the social media giants have actually shown that you can not just measure, predict, but even shape cognitive behavior of individuals. Similarly, another sector that you look at, the large movie production houses, some of the new age platforms like Netflix have shown how you can actually measure cognitive behavior and preferences to do what is the most powerful and mainstream form of storytelling, which is movie and OTT. So comms now can't say that we'll restrict ourselves to our area of storytelling. So some of the things that we're going to discuss today are examples of how one of the, some of the top corporations have actually used data analytics in their communication campaigns. We'll make it very real, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that we faced when we've tried to make everything more measurable. We'll also dwell upon some of the aspects of communication which have gained the maximum from data analytics, which is issue and crisis management. Because corporations have shown that you can actually monitor data to be predictive about the possible issues that can arise about your organization and institution. We'll also cover some of the other sections of the civic society which we can actually benchmark in the way they are actually using communication. Let me take an example. I took 2 examples earlier. But if you look at political parties, and in the last 5 years or so, the kind of stuff that they've done, right from capturing booth level data, of the voters, to measuring the user attitudes, micro-targeting on the local issues, and then being able to use a surfeit of communication tools and large army of social media professionals to then do through dark social like WhatsApp and through multiple other social media channels and on-ground channels, the communication that they will do in each of these. So I haven't seen any other sector, area, institution have taken it to that level. So this is definitely going to be a very interesting conversation. And before I get to my first question, I wanted to announce that there will be a small prize at the end for someone who's been able to predict the number of times the word data will be used, starting from when I said it in the discussion. So somebody from the organization team will be taking account. So I'm inviting people to take a guess, and someone who will be closest to that number will get that award. How many times will the word data be used in today's discussion? Anyone? Yeah, please speak up. 200 times, wow. Lots of pressure on you guys. 150. I heard 100. 94. Yeah, that's a well-rounded number. There's clearly some analytics and science that's gone behind it. Okay. Anybody else would like to guess? There's an interesting prize at the end of it. 75. Okay, great. So, let's move on. This first question is to nobody in particular here, whoever wants to take it. And this goes to, my personal experience. So about a year and a half back when we started this journey of saying we'll take data as a center stage of the communication strategy that we do, one of the biggest challenges that we faced is we went with all good intention to the various departments, right from advertising and marketing, to even some of our business teams and say, don't give us generalizations, don't come back to us with insights and data every 6 months. We want on a more regular basis an understanding of users' behaviors, attitude, actions, and on-ground stuff. And we want to be able to devise our comms policies tailor-made to that. It was a very, very tough exercise. So giving an example, because I work for a consumer tech company, right, which has lots of hotels and homes on its platform. We wanted to understand from the hotel owner side, I'll come to customers, which geographies are more hoteliers signing on and why? What is the strongest value proposition geography-wise that they are looking at while thinking of whether to join our platform or not? Is there a seasonality that we see based on when they choose to come our platform or not? Is there a difference segment-wise, from a budget hotel to a mid-segment hotel to somewhere in between? Very, very tough. We just won't get that data. And believe you me, the data existed in the company. Remember, we are a grounds-up tech company. It's just that synchronization wouldn't happen. They won't know the importance and realize it. So my first question to any of you, whoever wants to take it, is, have you also passed through a similar challenge of various other functions not giving you the input that you need on a regular basis? Whoever wants to take it. So you wanna go?
Data is something which has, which is not only part of the PR communication, but the part of the working of any organizations now. Any organization which is not working with the data is very difficult to now work with. For example, let me come, I'm from Bharat Petroleum, and 60% of my sales comes from retail outlets, which is like petrol and diesel. Now, if I look at it, you will see that earlier the communication, the conversations, and also the most of the focus of the company was like on metros, big volume, cars. And if you come into the petrol pump, you would see the first pedestal, which used to be for the cars, and the bikers used to send back on the behind the petrol pump. You know, is the last pedestal. But if you look at the data, you would find that 80% of our consumers across the country are bikers. And 20% are the cars customers. So the focus from our side was very disproportionate to a segment which was very small for us in terms of the consumer base. Likewise, metros were overhyped. And, but the growth in volumes in metros have plateaued. The growth has shifted to tier 2, tier 3 cities, to some extent to rural cities. States like UP, Bihar, and MP are growing phenomenally well in terms of petrol sale consumptions. And Maharashtra and Kerala, the more developed states, the growth is less. And that data we are bringing into strategy, how to open our fuel stations, where we must open up, where we must target our campaigns. And when the strategy is driven by this data in terms of reaching out to the consumers, the communications and the PR activities cannot leave behind. We have to sync with what the strategy and the data is throwing and accordingly target our campaigns. And therefore, that's where we have merged the strategy and the expansion plans with our communication plan.
This is fascinating. Unlike what we like to think, as a public sector unit, clearly there's a lot of integration. You know, amongst the various team, and you get enough information to be able to source your data. Let me come to a topic which I mentioned earlier, which is we've seen at the time of crisis or a potential issue, it's used very well. But then I remember you telling me, not from a current organization, but in the past, an example of how analytics was used to handle a fairly large-scale crisis that your company was facing. Would you like to share that?
Thank you, Nitin. First of all, for the introduction at the beginning and bringing up this particular topic. So, you were right when you mentioned in your introductory address that data and analytics have always been part of any successful communication. Whether it's a campaign or any particular issue that you are handling. Currently, it's becoming an integral part. Data and analytics for communicators such as us is no longer an option, it's a necessity. You have to depend largely on data to be able to make your communication strategy work. Now, going back to the particular experience that you are talking about, and this was almost 2 decades back, almost 20 years back, when technology was not what it is today, when availability of data was not as easy as it is today. Today, data is available on our fingers, on our palms, thanks to devices, mobile devices. So, when there was a very damaging report on the existence of harmful pesticides in a particular food product.
How
do you handle that?
Cola, right?
I'm not.
The fizzy drinks.
I'm not getting into. Yeah. So, these are brand names I don't want to mention, but definitely this is all in the public domain. I just wanted to share how data helped in addressing the issue. So when somebody talks about the existence of harmful objects in your food product, that is when you depend on what you know more than who you know in addressing that crisis. So who you know does matter. It is important that you know, you reach out to the right kind of people, but at the same time, you do your own research to find out what are the content of pesticides or harmful objects in the food items laid out on your dining table, in your breakfast cereals, in the fruits that you consume, in the apples, in the bananas, in the pomegranate that you consume on almost on a daily basis. At least banana, apples are part of the diet of a large number of Indian households. And then you find out through your research that the existence of pesticides in those food items is much more than what is being alleged in the product that you are selling. That is highlight number one. The highlight number two also is that when you do your own research, you find out that even the level of pesticide which is being talked about in your food product, first of all, it's permissible under certain laws in the country. Second, it is much less than large part of markets around the world. So these are your winning points. This is how you go to town carrying your case. That is how you communicate. Data and analytics became absolutely an integral part of that particular campaign. Empirical data. So it's not just basis the goodwill that you have, whether in the media or other stakeholder groups, which is why I made the point that who you know is important, but thanks to data and analytics, what you know also is equally important.
But did throwing numbers back at people for an issue which sort of an emotional issue, right? So it's about what am I ingesting and is it safe? Did that really work?
So you have to fight this battle at two levels. One is at the regulatory level. The other one, as you rightly said, is at the perception level. So the data and the analytics help you fighting the regulatory battle, where you are absolutely legally you have done nothing wrong. The second point is perception. Now here, not just data which helps you. So mere data, if it is given to you and you just use it as data, you may achieve 50-60% of your objective. But what is the insight? So you have to go into the insight. Just data, raw data is not helpful. Insights help you in fighting the perception, which is where you build your communication strategy, how to reach out to the other stakeholder groups. That's a tough ask. You are right. I mean, when you said that, so if you haven't broken any law, then your equation with regulators is fine. The other one is your consumers, the actual person who is consuming your food product, their kids, children at home, children of the customers. That is where you have to devise your comm strategy. But again, you have to rely on the insights that you are getting out of the data that you have at your disposal.
Great, thank you.
Something is
please,
coming
Sarvesh
to my
bhai.
mind, Nitinji. So, and it is related to your company. So that is why it instantly clicked me. I remember the discussion with Riteshji, with Chetan Bhagat, and you know that the world talks about OYO as a place for youngsters. And a question was asked by Chetanji, and how beautifully the insight which sir is talking about, he brought in an insight that the number of OYO visitors have increased in the places where pilgrimage centers are there. जहाँ जहाँ भगवान के भक्त जाते हैं वहाँ वहाँ ओयो की भीड़ ज़्यादा पड़ती है. So these insights are very important.
Sarvesh, thank you. By the way, it's interesting how some of these conversations get weaved into your strategy and tactics. वहाँ से हमने क्यों लेके we actually started monitoring very closely the booking patterns in cultural travel. It started from that conversation. And cultural travel will include heritage travel, pilgrimage, etc. and so on. And we actually launching a report next week on, our debut report on cultural travel, which we will include, which are the big pilgrimage destinations where we're seeing traffic. So, very interesting. But beyond this fun discussion, Let me also come to Sudeep. Sudeep, you worked for a sector earlier which perhaps has the richest source and the biggest source of generating data, right? When you are a telco, you have access to so much of information. Do you have examples and insights on how you're able to harness this in your communication strategy, either at this time or even now, the learnings you took from there if you're deploying them in your new organization?
Thanks, Nitin. Very interesting question. But before I answer that, let me just preface this conversation with a couple of points, if that's okay with you. So let me take all of us back to our childhoods. I know we are different generations here in some ways, but I think there's a very common prayer which most of us would have read or heard in the school. It used to start with, "Itni shakti hame dena data, man ka vishwas kamzor hona." And today, you are reading the same prayer again, it's just replacing data with data. Itni shakti hame dena data. And that's exactly what it is all about, right? Let me also put in a caveat there that when you're talking about data, there are two factors which are extremely critical. One is the authenticity of the data that you are referring to, and two is the credibility of the data, because data is coming from multiple sources. Today we are all being bombarded by it. So to my mind, data is just a diagnostic tool which helps you identify maybe what's happening around there or would possibly be correct or incorrect. And then you combine it with the guidance of or the interpretation that an experienced professional would have, with just like a doctor does before he's actually giving you a diagnosis of what could possibly be the problem and hence therefore the solution. So I treat data just like that, and I would encourage everybody to view it in the same way, because we are in the world where data can be manufactured, and that manufactured data can very often lead you to take decisions which are incorrect. Two, always remember, data is very open and transparent. Everybody has possibly the same access to it. So if you were looking at everybody having the same set of data and the same set of analytics and the insights, then everybody would reach the same decisions, but that's not really the case. If you were to take the same decisions based on the same set of data, there wouldn't be any progress. We would all be in steady state. The third point I would like to say is that very often we use data depending on the timelines. We have a hypothesis and we use data in a particular timeline to either prove it or disprove the hypothesis. And in that case, data acts just like any other tool. It is not differentiated because it's just serving the purpose without being meaningful about it. So why and when are you using data? I think it's very critical. We had a session on storytelling earlier, and one of the biggest storytelling is through fact-based storytelling, which Bharatendu was also referring to, and therefore data plays a huge role in that. But again, there are some times when the data points are not in your favor, so how do you weave a story around it? As communication professionals, I think we need to be extremely watchful. Data is, of course, a very potent and powerful tool, but it may not always be your best friend, so just do remember that. Your own experience, expertise, insights, what's happening around you can possibly also be very guiding and motivated factors. Sorry for the lengthy preface. Coming to the questions that you put, Nitin. I'll give you a classic example, and this doesn't fall under the domain of traditional PR, but in my days in the telecom company, Vodafone, which I was a part of, we were facing some really tough times, and we were coming up with a product which was an existing product, but we really wanted to sharpen the sales of that product. So they were talking about international roaming as a product, and typically we noticed that people who are traveling overseas would take matrix cards, and I'm happy to use the names because I am not bound by any competition guidelines on this one right now. So people would take matrix cards on their overseas trips, make the call, because it was a very easier billing process for them when they had to claim reimbursements from their organizations. So we had this sort of an insight. We also realized that most people who were using Matrix were essentially postpaid customers, which means they were premium customers. Also that typically the foreign travel would be for about on an average 5 to 7 days at least. So you had all these nice pieces of information, because when you're carrying your phone anywhere in the world, we know whether you're online or offline, right? And we know what was the last point of connect. So if you were at the airport when it got disconnected, we knew you have gone overseas, as simple as that. While you have this all level of data points, how do you create that into a meaningful proposition such that you are actually able to offer value to the customer? From a comms point of view, it required us to first work with the product team to create a value proposition and then talk about that value proposition to the right customers. And we didn't use this through media. We ignored media completely because we had direct access to the customers. Everybody was using the mobile phone. Everybody was on a data plan. So we just had to reach out to them directly. So that it taught us two things. First, it taught us that if you have the right value proposition and if you have a right way to engage with your own audiences, then you really don't need a third-party medium or an interface to reach out to them. And the best PR is actually done when there is not much reportage on it outside. I know we work in the domain of exposures and how much of key message dissemination, and some of us are still following older models of advertising value equivalence. But the most premium communication is when you drive a change in behavior and actually yields your results. So if my results jump up 3x because of an integrated, focused, sharply targeted campaign, which has all been done because of the rich insights gleaned through data, then the business objective is successful and the communication objective is successful. And that is what we were able to prove. We've been able to take those learnings into Tata Motors as well, and there's several projects, interesting ones that we are working on currently. We recently launched a proposition on LinkedIn called Motor Mentors, which was essentially about building thought leadership. And it was so interesting that today, we have put in 5 episodes of thought leadership out there, and because this was so sharply targeted in terms of the audience outreach, for every of the episodes that we have put out there, we have been able to get editorial amplification today in the best of media, both in print as well as digital, without any sort of investments to be made. So I'm just saying that sharper targeting and the right messaging is helping us yield much better results. It takes a lot of time to get there because you have to analyze it thoroughly and you have to cross-evaluate with certain other factors and parameters, but the results are pretty outstanding. So that's been my experience with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sudeep. You know, 2 points that I gathered here. One from the example that you took from a previous organization, right, which was to say, don't get stuck into, while you're doing problem solving, using information, don't get stuck into the standard metrics of saying, I need to go to mass media, I need to go to social media. If the solution is a very, very targeted communication campaign to a customer set you already have access to, right? And if you can show outcomes, that works as beautifully, right? I think a lot of us practitioners always want to demonstrate campaigns which are innovative and went viral. And we talk about click-throughs, engagement, reach, etc. Not talking about business outcomes because it's tough to measure there. So in fact, I'll take a small example before I come to the second point that you made. A small experiment that we did recently was a business problem that we were told that while about 40% of our company's, OYO's customer base, the use case is business travel, whether it's our SMEs, simple entrepreneurs, even to large corporates, right? And we have a division which tries very hard to attract this audience, etc. Most of our communication was geared towards tourism and lifestyle, leisure-led communication. So the experiment we did was say, listen, if we start talking about business travel and the benefits that we provide to those guys, right? How do we even measure whether that's having an impact or a change, in more corporates coming in? So we work very closely with the business team in this particular case. They're called OYO Business Accelerator Team. And we made 2 arrangements. We said, listen, you have a finite set of folks whom you already have the capability of reaching out to. You already do reach out to this set of, whether it's corporates, SMEs, etc. But the fact is, beyond a point that you're not getting traction, right? There's enough belief in, our value proposition. So we will get you widespread communication, which will get credibility to the message. You have to help push discoverability, because not every person is getting up and is news junkie and reading all the news out there. So you use your team members and the technology that you have available in ensuring that what gets covered actually gets seen by these folks, which they are in the process of doing. And then you do adequate follow-ups, but you don't leave it at that. You also give us analysis of normalized for seasonality in other case. In the next fortnight after this messaging went out, is there been a difference in the top of the funnel. So have the number of inquiries increased, etc. So when you did this end to end, right, it was so powerful that even they sort of, because the number of inquiries increased, and I'm going to go to that percentage, them and other business divisions are now coming back to us and say, we want to follow a similar model and do a very closely blended insight to communication campaign to dissemination to business outcome. So really powerful, it works. But the other point that you started making in general in your opening address was about accuracy of data, and if you're completely beholden to in your campaigns to the input that you that comes in, and if the input's incorrect, then your whole strategy can go wrong, right? Sarvesh is giving a very fascinating example because he works at the grassroots. You know, he's seen a real life examples of the way data adulteration can happen, right? The way it's captured, etc. And therefore, a term of caution for us, if we're just sitting in our offices and taking data that comes to us in devising strategy, that can be very damaging. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that example?
Yeah, I can. Data, the moment it becomes big data, the problem starts, because the impact is always bigger and larger. हम खास तौर पे अगर गांव की बातें करें या वेलफेयर, इंडिया इज़ अ वेलफेयर स्टेट और सदियों से चला आ रहा है. आप पुराने ज़माने में जाएंगे तो इवन ड्यूरिंग द माइथोलॉजिकल एरा देयर वाज पंडित, देयर वाज मंत्री एंड देयर वाज राजा. सो मंत्री वाज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर collating the data. The Pandit was the analyst who used to do the analysis and produce the result to the Raja. And Raja used to decide what is to be done for the people. अब बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बात ये है कि तब भी वो सारे मुद्दे जो आज ज़मीन के लिए चर्चा होती है, गाँवों के लिए, रूरल इंडिया के लिए बात होती है, या फॉर द लार्जर पॉपुलेशन, वो तब भी होती थी. इंटरेस्टिंगली रेवेन्यू की बात होती थी, फिनेंस की बात होती थी, हेल्थ की बात होती थी, और सबसे अच्छी बात जो है तब भी वो हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स की भी बात होती थी, जो आज बज़ वर्ड है. और उसको रीवेरीफाई करने के लिए राजा अपना वेश बदल के रात को जाता था और देखता था कि आखिर गाँव में इस बात पे चर्चा हो रही है कि नहीं. अगर आप माइथोलॉजी में जाएंगे तो राम जी की भी कहानी है एक, जो आई थिंक एवरीबडी नोज दैट. सो वहाँ से शुरुआत हुई और आज सरकार के सारे डिसीजंस डेटा पे फोकस्ड हैं. पर होता क्या है, मैं चूँकि डेटा की बातचीत बहुत सारी हो रही है तो मैं आप लोगों को डेटा के एक छोटे से 30 सेकेंड्स के सेशन में लेके जाता हूँ. इसको मैंने कागज़ में लिखा हुआ है, क्योंकि डेटा जब अगर आप लिख के नहीं रखोगे तो आप डेटा का डिस्टॉर्शन हो जाता है. सो इसको कहते हैं सिम्पसन पैराडॉक्स. आप सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है, इंक्लूडिंग अ पैनलिस्ट, अगर आप फ़ोन पे भी जोड़ सकते हैं तो बहुत टेक्निकल एक चीज़ मैं बताने जा रहा हूँ. आप सब 2 मिनट नहीं, आई विल टेक 30 सेकेंड्स. एडवर्ड सिम्पसन ने क्या किया, एक टेक्निकल पेपर लिखी 1951 में, और उसने उस पेपर में बताया कि डेटा जो सही में सच भी है उसमें भी अंदर कैसे नेगेटिविटी या फॉल्सहुड होती है उसके अंदर, और पॉजिटिव फॉल्स उसे कहते हैं. सो पॉजिटिव फॉल्स के लिए एक छोटा सा डेटा उन्होंने बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल दिए. किडनी स्टोन का एग्जाम्पल दिया कि सर्जिकल और नॉन सर्जिकल तरीके से किडनी स्टोन की एक रिपोर्ट बनी. और मैं फिर दोबारा बोलना चाहूँगा कि यू ऑल्सो राइट इट विल टेक 30 सेकेंड्स. सो द रिपोर्ट वॉज लाइक दिस. देयर वर 2 हॉस्पिटल्स, एक में सर्जिकल इंटरवेंशन हुई, दूसरे में नॉन सर्जिकल इंटरवेंशन हुई. फर्स्ट में 87 लोग ट्रीटमेंट के लिए गए, जिसमें से 81 ठीक हो गए सर्जिकल में. नॉन सर्जिकल में 270 पीपल वेंट, जिसमें से 234 ठीक हो गए. 93% आप देखेंगे सर्जिकल में परसेंटेज ऑफ क्योर आ गया या वेलनेस आ गई. 87% नॉन सर्जिकल में आया. दिस वॉज फॉर स्मॉल स्टोन. एक लार्ज स्टोन के लिए उन्होंने दूसरा डेटा डाला, 263 पीपल, for surgical went for treatment, 192 got cured. So ये 73% आया. फिर नॉन सर्जिकल में जब गए तो 80 लोगों ने एडमिट हुए वहाँ पे, जिसमें से 55 ठीक हो गए, तो उसका परसेंटेज 69 आया. सो आप देखेंगे कि सर्जिकल में 93% और 73% है, नॉन सर्जिकल में 87 और 69% है. पर अगर आप दोनों को जोड़ेंगे तो नॉन सर्जिकल का अगर आप परसेंटेज जोड़ेंगे तो नॉन सर्जिकल में कम आ जाएगा परसेंटेज, बट अगर आप नंबर्स जोड़ेंगे और नीचे आएंगे तो आप देखेंगे एक्चुअली नॉन सर्जिकल 83% सक्सेसफुल रहा और सर्जिकल 78% सक्सेसफुल रहा. विच मीन्स कि आपके पास डेटा है, बिल्कुल ठीक डेटा है, आप अलग अलग पढ़ेंगे तो आपको अलग अलग दिखेगा. और यही होता है नीचे. नीचे क्या होता है कि बीपीएल फैमिलीज़ को बहुत सारे बेनिफिट्स मिलते हैं, बिलो पॉवर्टी लाइन. मेरे पिताजी प्रधान हैं, उन्होंने बहुत सारे लोगों को बीपीएल का कार्ड बना दिया. अब वो कार्ड जब बन जाता है, वैसी स्थिति में क्या होता है कि वो आदमी एक लेवल से नीचे चला जाता है. एंड यू विल बी सरप्राइज टू नो द रियलिटी ऑफ द कंट्री वंस यू गो टू द विलेजेस एंड यू विल फाइंड दैट मोस्ट ऑफ दीज बीपीएल पीपल हैव देयर ओन हाउसेज, दे हैव देयर व्हीकल्स. बीपीएल में आने के लिए मैंडेटरी है कि ये सारी चीज़ें नहीं होनी चाहिए, तभी आप बीपीएल में आ सकते हैं. और जो सही में बीपीएल वाले लोग हैं वो उस लिस्ट में है नहीं. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि सुबह मैं जब ये शर्ट पहन रहा था, गलती से मैंने पहला बटन गलत लगा दिया तो मेरे सारे बटन गलत लगते गए. सो बेस ऑफ डेटा, इफ योर बेस ऑफ डेटा इज रॉन्ग, योर एंटायर एनालिसिस इज गोइंग टू बी रॉन्ग. एंड दिस इज द प्रॉब्लम विच वी आर सफरिंग टुडे. ग्राउंड रियलिटी में नीचे से ही डेटा सारा का सारा ऊपर से गलत आता है तो डिसीजंस गलत होते हैं. बहुत बार ऐसा होता है. मैं ये नहीं कहता हूँ बिना डेटा के कुछ नहीं चल सकता. हमारा काम क्या है? हम तो कम्युनिकेशन के लोग हैं. हम तो मालिक के इंटेंट को कंटेंट के थ्रू पुश करते हैं और रिलेशनशिप के थ्रू छपवाते हैं. हमारा काम ही वो है. पर बहुत सारी जगह सच्चाई होती है और ये एक ग्राउंड लेवल की सच्चाई है.
सर्वेश जी, आपने बहुत सही कहा, बट उसमें एक क्वेश्चनरी ये है. I try and do it very often. I hope others do as well. The information that is coming to you should definitely pass the smell test. If it doesn't, don't blindly use it as your input to devise your strategies, right? So I love to question and cross question, and which isn't easy, by the way, all the time, because essentially what you're trying to do is doubt a colleague and information that he's provided. So but very important, because we know that while capturing data, a whole lot of things can happen. Inaccuracies which are intentional or unintentional, right? I would have loved to have discussed a little more about some of the social campaigns that you're doing and how you're utilizing data there. We'll try and come back to you, but let's quickly get to Abbas ji, because we're also coming towards the end of the session. You're telling me something very interesting. And by the way, when one thinks of Bharat Petroleum, right, two things come to mind. It's a commoditized sector. It's a sector which is in fossil fuel. Not something very glamorous. A whole lot of interactions, maybe B2B. But you're talking to me about a couple of fascinating examples where you've been targeting the youth and the millennials, right, through business to consumer programs, including an initiative that you spoke about, which is UFIL, right? So would you like to share some insights related to that?
Yeah, roughly about 16 million of bikers. We serve fuel every day at our network of more than 20,000 fuel stations across the country. And their fill size, if you see, is quite low. And sometimes we would have noticed that the time of refueling a bike is lesser than making the payment, and there used to be a long queue, especially. And fuel station, as you see, is not an experience stop. People would not prefer to come to a fuel station unless they are running out of the fuel. So it's a pain stop. So everybody wants to get in and get out very, very quick. Post-COVID, what we have seen is a marked increase in digital payments, and people are very comfortable. People are used to, especially even in the rural countries. And what we found was that the young generation were more comfortable in making the payments digitally, would prefer to have a quick in and out. And we launched an initiative which we call it You Fill, in which while sitting here or anywhere, you can make the payment for the fueling that you would like to do today, tomorrow, or even next week. So this UFill is an app, is a Hello BPCL app. You make a payment, can be with credit card, UPI, any which way, get a QR code, go to the fuel station and just scan it, and the machine gets locked. Locked by the payment, the product, which is petrol or diesel, which we like to choose, and also the meter gets zero automatically. So once the machine gets locked in, the attendant will put in the nozzle, the pre-decided the fuel quantity will get delivered, and you just drive out. So what we did was when we launched this campaign, since we were targeting the bikers, we were targeting the millennials, we worked out on the demography from the data that we get it. What is the spread of bikers, customers that we have within the town, which areas, within the state, which cities, and in cities, targeting more of a tier 2 and 3 cities. And then we, through social media, we targeted right demography, bikers with 35 years and below. What we found out at the end of the month-long campaign is that you fill the number of users exceeded 6 times, and also the transaction also jumped 3 times, the value per day, and it has stayed since then. So, and here the data came into handy, the data which the retail team was using it. We used this data and targeted the campaign, and then we saw the efficacy of that the campaign, and we found that yes, this is where it worked. So it is very important, as you said, is if we have a right data to build upon a campaign and then measure it, what's working and what's not working, would help you to have a quicker response, effective campaign, and also you can, the cost of the campaign will also be much lower than launching a pan-India meant for everybody. You would know exactly how to communicate it, because the communication directed to a 35-year-old young boy or girl would be very, very different than maybe a car owner of my age, and that helps a lot.
Thank you. You know, I personally believe we've just scratched the surface of this topic and subject. We've covered some ground, including a fascinating example, real-life example of how we've actually, a PSU is targeting the youth in a very focused manner, using new age tools and being able to measure the impact and results. You know, we've had examples of how data and analysis were used to fight a crisis, how problems arise when the data capturing itself is wrong, especially in grassroots social sector. We had Sudeep giving us some more fascinating examples as well. I'm afraid we're coming towards the end of this session. We have about 5 more minutes. I'll take 3-4 extra minutes liberty to also throw the, it open to the audience for questions and comments. I'll also say one thing that's coming to my mind. This is a quote that has been playing the last 2 days. It's referred to Albert Einstein, and I'm not sure whether it's correct or not, the attribution, but which goes, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that's countable counts. So with that, comments or questions from the audience, please. Yeah, the lady there.
Hi, my name is Navodita. So my question is that in today's, thank you for your insights first of all, because I deal with data, so it's quite useful to know that we really need to know a lot more about data, especially when dealing with big data. So in today's new age PR, where hashtags have almost replaced press releases, even governments coming on social media related to social media marketing. How do you think data and analytics can be used to improve communication strategies of campaigns like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao और स्वच्छ भारत अभियान, जो कि बहुत ही अहम जन संपर्क अभियान है, and there are a lot of challenges vis-a-vis the target audience?
I would have had hardly any answer to you on my area of expertise. Thankfully, we have just the right person here who will answer this.
So I have been, in fact, PR professionals, the organization which I represent, and the founder of that, we have been associated with both the projects. So I think very aptly said, data, in fact, it's other way around. For projects like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao or Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, these are large intensive programs जहाँ पे numbers का ही सारा खेल है और वहाँ पे data सबसे ज़्यादा important हो सकता है. जैसे हरियाणा से जब बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ की शुरुआत हुई थी और हरियाणा ने इनिशिएटिव लिया था, बिकॉज आपको पता है कि वहाँ पे बहुत सारे ऐसे केसेस आते थे, बेटियों के को मार दिया जाता था और वहाँ पे एक ब्रांड एम्बेसडर क्रिएट किया गया, फिल्म एक्ट्रेसेस आई और बहुत सारी चीज़ें आई. तो डिस्ट्रिक्ट वाइज डेटा कोलेट्रल के ऑफिसर्स क्रिएट किए गए थे और हर ऑफिसर की जिम्मेदारी थी कि हर, एंड डिस्ट्रिक्ट कमिश्नर वाज हेड ऑफ दैट. सो डीसी जिसे कहते हैं वो हेड करते थे एंड इट वाज देयर जॉब टू इंश्योर दैट द डेटा इज़ करेक्ट, क्योंकि सरकार की इंटेंट क्लियर थी कि कुछ ना कुछ करना है और जब तक हम तब तक कुछ नहीं कर सकते जब तक हमारे पास डेटा सही ना आए. सो उसको सप्लीमेंट करने के लिए उन्होंने डिजिटल को भी यूज़ किया और पीआर को भी बहुत, जो ट्रेडिशनल पीआर है उसको बहुत ही ज़्यादा एक्सटेंसिव यूज़ किया गया था. सो वी वर पार्ट ऑफ इट. स्वच्छ भारत, आप अगर हम आज यहाँ स्वच्छ भारत कह रहे हैं और हम सब जान रहे हैं तो इसका मतलब ये है कि बहुत एक्सटेंसिव तरीके से कम्युनिकेशन स्ट्रेटजी को इस्तेमाल किया गया था. सो पहला एग्जाम्पल ये है कि एवरीबडी वाज इन्वॉल्व, सबके दिमाग के कोने में स्वच्छ भारत बैठा हुआ है. दूसरा ये है कि अगेन मॉडल सरकार के काम करने का मॉडल ही, ये सब सरकारी प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं, सरकार के काम करने का मॉडल ये होता है कि वो सबसे पहले स्टेट पे लेके जाती है, उसके बाद डिस्ट्रिक्ट, डिस्ट्रिक्ट के बाद से ब्लॉक, ब्लॉक के नीचे पंचायत और पंचायत के बाद ग्राम लेवल पे. सो इसके हर जगह पे कोई ना कोई, जैसे ब्लॉक लेवल पे ब्लॉक डेवलपमेंट ऑफिसर होता है, इट वाज हिज रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी टू गेट द डेटा ऑफ द एंटायर ब्लॉक. विलेज में पंचायत में मुखिया और प्रधान होते हैं अलग अलग जगह, उनकी जिम्मेदारी थी. एंड that was huge data which was collected and based on the data कहाँ पे क्या ज़रूरत है वो implement करी थी सरकार ने. So it was widely used.
I'm sure you want to have a side conversation with him to know more about this. We'll take the liberty of one more question. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Somebody else is raising, yeah, gentlemen.
Thanks for an enriching session, sir. I am Saurabh Jain. I have a question to Mr. Sudeep. Well, first of all, congrats, sir. You have given, Tata Motors have given a 200+% growth. I just want to know what worked well, whether it's an organic growth or some PR strategy has gone behind for this phenomenal sales in the month of May.
Thank you very much. I think it's not, it'll be false to say that there's a PR strategy which has delivered this kind of a growth, because the growth has been happening for the last couple of years, month on month, and it's been industry beating growth. I think what has happened in the month of May are two factors. One is, of course, we were able to produce with a better agile approach. We were able to produce and sell more. I think that's a simple, right? It's like if it's a race, you have to cross the finish line first. That's about it. So as long as you cross the finish line first, you're the winner. So that's what works, and to do that, it requires a tremendous amount of energy, optimization, and a deep struggle across the organization, because we are in the midst of an extremely critical supply chain issue with semiconductor availability not being there, etc. So there are multiple forces at play, and all those forces at play work in synergy towards driving the same thrust. I think that's when the engine fires, and that's what's happened in this case. Hopefully it'll keep on firing with your best wishes and blessings. Look forward to that. Thank you.
यार ये इंजन फायर थोड़ा ध्यान से यूज करें वर्ड.
सर इंजन तो फायर ही करेगा, किसी भी इंजन में आप जाएंगे तो. और अगर ईवीज की बात कर रहे हैं तो उसमें इंजन होता ही नहीं है, उसमें मोटर्स होती हैं.
Well said, well said. I think we are way beyond time. I'm getting stares to the organizers. I'll just close with a question for all of you. In the movie Moneyball, we all learned how data completely changed the perception of how baseball was looked at as a sport. And now the pre-data generation doesn't exist in that sport, or for that matter all other major competitive sport. So can PR also have its own Moneyball moment? And if so, would that be a good thing? I'll close with that. Thank you. Thank you for being a patient audience.